Hello and a very warm welcome. In this one, we are going to deal with the theme of major expected consequences of global warming. This is the third video of the series, and I hope that you have watched the first and second videos of the series. That will help you understand the concepts and link them very well. So, the theme of consequences of global warming has been divided into two parts. The first part deals with the global impact, and the second part that will be covered in the next video will be dealing with impact on India. Let us deal with the global impact first. When we come to the global impact, first and foremost, let us make a reference to the sixth assessment report of IPCC. IPCC stands for Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and it is an intergovernmental body, like the name itself suggests, established in 1988 by the World Meteorological Organization and United Nations Environment Programme. The IPCC is basically a network of scientists and academicians from different walks of life, not necessarily climate science only, climate science, geographical sciences, and then, of course, sociologists, economists, all of them serve within the IPCC network. And the purpose of IPCC is to create assessment reports by analyzing the various researches which are published in the field of climate change and its impact. So IPCC, for the sake of clarity, let us understand that IPCC does not carry out any research of its own. It is more into analyzing the research and drawing its conclusion and publishing them in the form of assessment reports. So the assessment reports are periodic publication from the IPCC, and the most recent assessment report is the sixth assessment report. It was released in three parts. The first part was released in August of 2021. The second and third parts were released in early part of 2022, March 2022 and April 2022 respectively. The second part deals primarily with the impact. And this video and the upcoming video on impact on India, they both draw so much information from the second part of the report. So one thing that IPCC very clearly says, that compared to the pre-industrial time, and in the previous video we spoke about the pre-industrial year of 1750 is taken as the base year compared to which the mean rise in the global temperature has been assessed, and we have come to the conclusions of global warming and resulting climate change. So IPCC says that we are very close to touching, or for that matter exceeding, the 1.5 degree centigrade warming compared to the pre-industrial level. And this 1.5 degree warming compared to the pre-industrial level is believed to bring so much severe changes in the ecosystem, in different agricultural system, and also in general weather phenomena, that the likely outcomes are expected to be very, very catastrophic, if not disastrous. So the global community last year took a call to do its best to keep the rise in global temperature within 1.5 degrees centigrade compared to the pre-industrial time. Let us see if we are able to do it or not, but that is the present global priority. The maps here very clearly shows that when the global temperature rises, so the global temperature is not going to rise uniformly. In some of the parts of the world, the temperature will be rising very dramatically. In some parts of the world, temperature rise will be moderate, and in some parts of the world, temperature rise will be relatively less. So here we are looking at the relative rise in average temperature. So on an average, we are going to see the relative rise of 1.5 degrees centigrade compared to what today? No, compared to the pre-industrial temperature. Where are we standing right now? So it is now accepted that we are already at 1.1 degree centigrade elevation compared to the pre-industrial level. And climate change is already here, and we are witnessing so many impacts of climate change, and not from now, but for past several years in a row. I'm going to cite certain examples, and you will be able to relate to those examples because you have definitely read about it, but let us come to that point when we talk about it. Then the latest IPCC report, which is the assessment report 6, that warns that the elevation of 1.5 degrees centigrade compared to the pre-industrial level will be touched by the year 2040 or maybe a little before also. And it is very important to keep the temperature arrested within this limit. Let us not touch that limit, or very definitely let us try not exceeding that limit. So that is what the climate change phenomenon, uh, its impact, that it is already here and we are witnessing the impact. Let us now get into certain examples. And I was telling you that there are examples which you can very well relate to. If you remember whatever you have read in the newspaper in the last year, so you would read about the forest fires in the United States of America, especially along the western coast. And of all the places, just imagine Amazon rainforests being the sufferer of immense forest fire. Then in India, within Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand, again we are seeing increased episodes of forest fire. You just need to go to the website of Forest Survey of India and check the pattern of forest fire in the last few years. So every year, because of prolonged dry weather, especially before the onset of monsoon, is making the Himalayan forest very, very prone to forest fires. So let us not think that forest fires are the phenomena which affect only American forests and recently Amazonian rainforest. Now the forest fires are increasing in India also. Then if you recall, the 2022 heat wave in India and Pakistan, which led to human diseases and mortality. Apart from that, there was a clear decline in wheat output in the 2021-22 cropping season. So the number of wheat plants, the density of wheat plants in the field was largely the same, but this year the grain size was smaller. So per hectare tonnage was relatively less in comparison to earlier years, and that was largely due to the heat wave that started in very early part of March itself. That was just around the time when wheat harvest starts. So a little before that, the daytime temperature started touching 40 degrees centigrade, and that impacted the output level per hectare of a standing wheat crop in that cropping season. Then higher frequency and intensity of extreme events is again known to us. Much more frequently, we are witnessing much more intense cyclones. Heat waves, I have just now spoken about. Snowstorms in USA and Canada was particularly severe this year. But if you browse through the newspaper from the month of late November until the end of February, you will see the same pattern in 2020-21 winter, in 2021-22 winters. So snowstorm and its increased severity is also becoming pretty much a norm in Northern America. Cloudbursts has been impacting our own hilly estates, often leading to very disastrous consequences. Flooding is happening much more intensely, and even in such areas where earlier not much flooding was happening. Coral bleaching is today at a scale which has not been witnessed earlier. All of these are quite obvious signs of climate change being already here. And IPCC also agrees कि जब climate change होगी, so it will be disproportionately impacting the marginalized sections of the society and in the world, the marginalized countries of the world. So it is going to impact poorer nations and poorer communities and women much more than the countries which have built capacity to deal with the consequences of climate change. Now, let us do a little sectoral analysis at the level of global consequences. So here we are, and let us start with the sea level rise. So sea level rise is something that is already taking place. और IPCC ये कहती है कि even if we are going to check our emission now, the sea level rise is likely to continue for at least 100 more years. When the sea level rises, it will have catastrophic consequences for low-lying coastal area. We are going to witness a lot of coastal communities, coastal cities submerging. That will be causing massive human displacement. So the first thing that we are talking about is submergence. And submergence of coastal areas will mean massive human migration. And that brings you to the concept of climate refugees, right? Apart from that, destruction of coastal agriculture, similarly, destruction of coastal economic activities and infrastructure. Then, of course, there will be saltwater ingression. And this saltwater ingression is going to create problem for water for the coastal communities and all of this. So when we are talking about higher sea levels leading to flooding or submergence of low-lying areas, so these are the consequences we are very clearly seeing. Moving next, melting of polar ice caps will be destroying the polar ecosystems, polar biodiversity. The polar areas are not very rich in biodiversity, but they support very unique biodiversity. The biodiversity that you will not be finding in any other part of the world. So that kind of biodiversity support comes from the polar ecosystems. But if the polar ice caps melt, so one of the obvious consequences will be the polar biodiversity starting to deplete. A number of threatened species from such ecosystems will also go extinct. Second thing is it is going to increase the sea level further, and the consequences of sea level rise we have already seen. So here, destruction of polar ecosystem and consequent loss of biodiversity. And also there is going to be rising sea level. It is also going to affect the heat distribution within marine system of the world. So much of cold water being released in the oceans will be releasing the heat distribution pattern, and that will further be causing loss of biodiversity and also weather changes. So we have seen two consequences: sea level rise and then melting polar ice caps. Melting of glaciers and Himalayan glaciers are also included there, is going to have disastrous consequences for the rivers which depend on these glaciers. That also includes our river Ganga. So what happens that when the glaciers are melting, to begin with, the rivers will be experiencing more water. But eventually the melting glaciers will be receding. And as the melting glaciers recede, the rivers will be witnessing much less amount of water than earlier. It is believed that as of now, a lot of glacial rivers in the world, in our country also, are witnessing very low levels of water. And it should not be surprising anyone if over a long horizon of time, about 50 to 100 years, a lot of perennial rivers end up becoming seasonal rivers. And that will actually be catastrophic. And I'm not using the word catastrophic lightly here. The thing is, if you study history, you will see that with the rivers, civilizations have come up. And with the rivers, civilization have vanished. So imagine rivers themselves being threatened. And then again, river biodiversity is also going to be threatened. That will mean further loss of a species. And rivers are not only civilizational support, but rivers give us water, which we run through the canal and irrigate our farmlands. Rivers are sources of so many economic activities, including fishing, transportation and all. Rivers being seasonal or rivers having less flow of water will be jeopardizing all these aspects. And that all comes from receding of glacial caps, and glacial caps are receding because of global warming and climate change. Moving next, there will be changes in the long established wind and ocean current systems, and that will be leading to erratic and more intense weather, like extremely hot days that we have recently witnessed, very high rainfall days that we have been seeing erratically happening in different parts of our own country, and that is leading to flooding in such areas which are not traditionally known for floods. And when the floods happen, these areas are caught totally unprepared. that increases the losses associated with such floods. Then we have got lower agricultural productivity, increasing desertification, and lower food and nutrition security. So why do we think that agricultural productivity is going to be less? The first reason is change in rainfall. So yesterday when we spoke about the consequences of climate change, so we were talking about the shift in rainfall pattern. So not consequences of climate change, but the manifestations of climate change. So there we saw that changes in rainfall is one of the important parts of climate change. When that happens, so rain dependent agriculture is definitely going to be impacted. Then severe weather phenomena are also going to impact the standing crop and also suitability of different areas for certain types of cropping. The areas which are good for cropping as of now may not always remain good for that kind of cropping. The next part will be the flood and droughts, etc. And not to mention changes in the climatic pattern is also going to increase the attack by certain types of pests or prevalence of certain types of crop diseases and all of that. Desertification is again increasing despite our best effort under the UN Convention on Combating Desertification. Countries have taken a lot of steps, but because of climatic changes, desertification is actually increasing. It is not decreasing. And when the farm sector gets impacted, there will be lower food and nutrition security. And as earlier said, the marginalized communities and women are going to bear the brunt much more than the rest of the society. Lower fishing output is already being reported. Part of it is due to overfishing, but also part of it is due to changes in the heat distribution, disturbance in the ocean ecosystem by ocean acidification, and so on. So that is also happening. Next is increased water scarcity in some of the regions. 3 reasons. Number 1, salt water ingression. The second reason is reduction in river flow. That is also happening. And the third reason will be erratic rainfall pattern. So these are the 3 reasons which will be creating water scarcity. In our country, the northern, the western parts are already witnessing water scarcity, and the water scarcity situation has intensified in the last 1 decade. The scientists say that it is because of climate change impact. Now we come to the global ecosystems are changing. The basic trophic relation, that is who eats whom and how the food chain works. So basic trophic relations are changing. Destruction of ecosystem is also taking place, like forest fire, flooding, and so on. And because of that, the biodiversity supported by these ecosystems is also depleting. Species are getting extinct. So climate change is increasing the rate of extinction primarily by causing destruction of the ecosystem. Apart from the destruction of ecosystem, there is also a factor of increasing prevalence of different diseases in the forests, which will be targeting certain species and will be making those species extinct. A couple of fungi, which were not so aggressively spreading, they now spread in a lot of tropical forest far more aggressively. And the reports are there that they target rare amphibian species and eliminating the members of those amphibia. So this is just one of the many examples. These are the examples which the scientists have been able to find. There are so many examples which scientists have not yet been able to discover. And as a result, we do not know what all species might be getting extinct without even being known to us. Then we have got direct impact of extreme weather events on human health. So last year, we have seen close to 20,000 people losing their life directly or indirectly because of heat wave. So there are a lot of people who were kind of forced to work out in the open despite such a scorching heat condition. Human body can only take a limited amount of heat shock. After that, different bodily systems they start kind of touching the limit of what should be their optimal range of functioning. So 20,000 people, including India and Pakistan, lost their lives in 2022, which is attributable to intense heat wave that happened. This much is the estimation of international agencies. The number could be more, the number could be less. Apart from that, there is also an increased chance of re-emergence of certain diseases because of the change in climatic condition, and also the spread of third world vector-borne diseases in the first world, where because of their climate, the vector-borne diseases were just unknown. Now we are seeing in Western Europe, in Northern Europe, the temperature being warm enough to allow mosquito breeding. And if mosquito increase in number, then vector-borne diseases will also be seen in these countries. So that is an indirect impact on human health, apart from the direct impact of high temperature or snowstorm and all. Apart from that, there is going to be significant economic impact. Economic impact will be taking place because of damage to infrastructure, property, then increased cost for energy. And of course, when there will be damage, there will be burden on insurance companies. There will be losses to the industry that rely on natural resources. Besides, we are also looking at impact on agricultural sector. And for so many countries in the world, agricultural sector is one of the most important pillars of their economy. So these are the consequences on the economy in general. We are also looking at forced migration. The right word of those getting displaced from their place of living because of climate change impact are known as, the name is climate refugees. So the problem of climate refugee is already becoming a part of mainstream discussion. The world is so ill-equipped to handle the problem of climate refugees, but this is something which is likely to happen more and more in the decades to come. Because of that, there is always a likelihood of social and political conflicts. These are some of the major impacts that we are looking at because of climate change impact on a global scale. In the next video, we are going to take a look on impact on our country, how our country in general is going to be impacted. Then we will be looking into economic impact in particular, and within economic impact, we shall be taking sectoral review. So where do we conclude now? To begin with, urgent and ambitious action is needed. Ambitious action basically means we should be looking to close the increasing trend of temperature within 1.5 degree centigrade. There is not much time available. We have barely 15 years up ahead of us when the global temperature would have risen by 1.5 degree centigrade compared to the pre-industrial level. Within this period of time, the countries of the world, according to their capabilities and according to their historic responsibilities, will have to take very, very strong and ambitious action. And like I said, that the window for limiting warming to 1.5 degrees centigrade is rapidly closing. So the countries have to work with certain degree of urgency. So that is where we can conclude our discussion. I hope you understood all the key facts and all the concepts involved here. In the next video, I'm going to talk about and take a deeper look on climate change impact on India. That is what comes in the next video. This is the cover page from the last week's issue of Time magazine, which says how India became the most important country for climate future. It says that a lot of steps that India is going to take will be deciding the climate future of the entire world. That is to an extent true, and India has been taking a lot of steps that we will be discovering within this series itself. Meanwhile, I will meet you in the next video when we discuss impact on India. Till then, goodbye and good luck.